have kind of a special Q&A session here because not only will we have m4dz speaking towards their experience, we're going to bring Julien on the stage as well to speak about theirs. We're also going to welcome Joonas Kykkänen from m4dz to also speak about design systems and be a part of this Q&A. So I'd like to welcome Joonas and Julien back to the stage. We're going to sit. We're going to get comfy.
Yeah,
it's going to be a proper panel style, yeah. I think. Yeah.
You got some coffee?
No coffee. We have water, though. Isn't that close
nice.
Enough? Okay. Yes. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So we have quite a few questions here. Thank you to everyone for being active inside of Clapper. I think we're pushing this thing to the limits already. So the highest rated question here would probably go to start with Julien here about web components. And it's often in our components, we deal with a lot of things like state management, business logic, and complex behavior. How can we really express these within our web components?
Okay, I don't know if my mic works. Okay. I think it might be a bit of a rabbit hole that leads to a kind of debate in the web community because there is like different use cases, I think, for web components and frameworks components. And when we deal with state management, business logic, I think it's more a use case for frameworks components, like React components, Vue components, or at least not in a design system. In a design system components, you don't want to put business logic at all. So it's more on the application side that we will want to have state management or complex business logic. And so in React, Angular, Vue components, it's technically possible in web components. In Stencil, for instance, there is a little state management API, so it's possible to use it in Stencil web components. But I don't think I would recommend that. At least in a design system, there should not be too much state to share between the components. But I think it's more than the application side.
Yeah, if I could also add to that yes,
absolutely.
Business logic is not something that you should put into your design system. So therefore, the requirements for web components are not that huge as compared to like the other components in your application. And then the way the state management is handled in web components is like that's the part where you bring in those third-party libraries to kind of like extend the capabilities of web components. And I do understand that kind of goes against the basic idea of like getting rid of the web components, getting rid of extra JavaScript libraries.
Anything that you would like to add about that, or do you think they got it pretty well covered there?
Good.
Pretty good? All right, cool. Staying on the topic of web components then, another question here we have is, you mentioned, Julien, in your talk about not being able to pass JSX into the web component because it's just a web component, beneath the hood. How would you go about then approaching composability and composite components within the world of web components?
Right. Composability would be used with slots in web components. So slot is like React children. So you can perfectly put components inside other components and use composability that way. You can also have named slots in web components. Like it's a bit more like Vue named slots. So you can have multiple slots in one component and insert them whenever you want in your template. So it's like we can do that in React using, for instance, the render property pattern. So we can insert multiple JSX nodes in your components. So it's also possible in web components using the slot and named slot APIs.
Anything from you, Joonas, on that? Or did you pretty much have it well covered?
Yeah, I think it's like well covered of like
okay.
how to compose those web components. And I guess just to Also, if the question is more about like, well, how do you compose design systems in general? Like what type of responsibilities do you give to those design systems? The business logic was mentioned earlier. That's not something design systems should handle. But then in addition to that, it really depends on the organization and your team of like how much other presentational responsibilities you give to your design system components. Some organizations want only design tokens. They might want to get rid of, like, to have like no components, only design tokens. And then you might have some organizations and teams that really want a lot of components, a lot of different components. So it does vary organization to organization.
Yeah, I guess it's probably something of a governance problem. Like, if we stick properly to an atomic design approach, finally you should not have to embed GSX and framework directly related logic inside the web components. They should be just outside, like just building the template or the big organisms or something like that. And inside that, it should be only web components finally.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit away from web components, I think there's a lot of interest, Mads, in kind of your path through this whole journey that you went through. I know I would have been intimidated stepping into a Django code base and being like, how to make this reasonable. So looking back at your path now, if you had to start it all over again, would you take the same approach? Would you change the approach? Would you just scratch it, go greenfield? How would you approach it now if you entered the same problem now?
That's a nice question. If it was just me, I would have go with just revamp of the way the backend is just serving the different services with an API first architecture. So we could have built a web app totally in the good way of it, like using a React or Vue or whatever to consume the APIs, and that's all. And which means that we could also have a mobile application or something like that. So it increased the different kind of possibilities. But the team really weren't ready for that because it was not the way the stack was designed in the past. So it was not doable, and it's still not doable today. Or it is, but it's a huge amount of work, and it's a nonsense. I would have preferred that we would stick with only web components because it's give or take what we made with the Shinja-X generated syntax that looks like components with some logic handled by custom script that are auto-registering to hook up onto the templates and so on. But I understand why the team just said, okay, we don't want to learn stencil or we don't want to learn lit or whatever. We prefer to stick with simple things that we understand, generating templates and putting some kind of magic JavaScript stuff on it, and that's all. And I totally understand that. So I probably won't do it differently today. I don't think so, because it worked well enough to have the team committed to use this design system, which is the final goal of it. So yeah, it was definitely the best trade-off that we had.
Yeah, and I really liked your story as kind of like a story like how to adapt to the engineering team, because like design systems have two main value propositions. For end users, it is that consistency that you can have in your UI, and then for the engineers, it's a developer productivity tool. And it's not a productivity tool if you go there to the team and say like, well, now you have to learn all of these new technologies and this old code base, say goodbye to it. We're going to rebuild it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great point. Cool. So one other thing here that I think we can get into, there's a lot of talk about web components. I think we should make this as a note for next year. But there are challenges using web components in server-side rendering. Would any of y'all like to take the ball on speaking about how to maybe approach some of those challenges? Is it worth approaching those challenges of using web components in a server-side rendered environment?
Well, at the end, I took the easy path of saying, well, don't use web components for static site generation, because I think there are cases where they will just bring more problems than they will solve. I mean, it is still possible. Stencil, for instance, provides a function that you can call on the server, a function like render to string. So you can render your components on the server side. It works, but will it work? How will it handle like partial hydration on the client side? How do we handle that? I think it's way more complex when using web components. You can't expect to just use web components and everything will work. It's a big issue that framework authors have to make web components work with advanced features like selective hydration and that kind of stuff. And I understand that they already have enough on their plate, and I understand that they don't want to work too much on web components because it's very difficult. So yeah, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, and Lit, the library that you mentioned, they are experimenting with the server-side rendering, trying to offer new tools. But even that, it's like, I don't know if they say it's like in preview mode or something, like they say like do not use it in big applications in productions yet. And some of our clients, like the server-side rendering, is like a biggest obstacle for the web component adoption. Like a lot of teams are like scared of like SEO and other impacts, even if they don't need server-side rendering now, but they might think about like, well, what if we need it next year? You know, will we have to like rewrite everything?
Yeah, definitely something that comes up a lot in the world of design systems. I'm faced with the questions as well myself, so quite interesting to hear y'all's perspective and your experience with it. The last thing here that can be real quick. Did everyone have access to Julien's QR code to the repo, or does anyone still need that to be displayed?
You can just come after and
okay. If you still need it, sure. Come up. Julien will share that with you, so we can make sure to share that repo and you have access to that content. But with that, let's give one more round of applause to our speakers and our QA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now with that, we will take a short break and we'll be back, I believe, at 3:30 with our next theme. See you then.